The interview that you're about to hear is done with a young person that I volunteer with at MIEACT. She is an incredible young woman. Her story is amazing. It is relevant to people that have children, young children particularly, with mental illness. And it's also instructional in many other ways. It's a delightful interview. Now, by no fault of her own, we had a bit of an error with the videoing, and we also had a little bit of sound issues. It's not terrible, but you'll hear a few little blips and gleeps and things happen throughout this interview. She will be represented by photos for the first part, but about halfway through we were able to restore the video, and it will look much better if you're on YouTube. If you are on audio, none of this will make any sense to you because it all comes together pretty seamlessly. I do hope you enjoy. I am really proud of this interview. I'm proud of Millie. I hope you'll enjoy. Subscribe, like, and share. Well, it is my absolute joy today to welcome to the show somebody that I've only met just recently, but she's already had a massive impact on my life and my mental health. So it's my absolute joy to mention a name that people have been asking me about. It is the one and only Millie. G'day, Millie. How's it going?
Hey, Mark. It's good. I'm good. How are you?
Good. No, I have been asked by people, who is that person you're talking about? Who was the person that was talking that talked to you all about patience? And also, excitingly, I'm going to put the link to this podcast as well. I just read a news article about you.
Yeah. Yes, that's come out, over the weekend. And that has been huge as well. I'm really excited to have that out there, and I've had a lot of positive feedback about that.
I'm going to go into that as we go on. I'll ask you if I could get just a little bit of feedback about you, or a little bit of information about yourself. Your mental illness
Yeah.
started incredibly young.
Yeah. I mean, I know it starts younger for some people, but for me, it really became apparent when I was 10 and I started having panic attacks. So back in primary school. And because I was so young, I think it just wasn't picked up, and I didn't understand what was going on, and people around me didn't understand either, because we all assumed that kids don't have to deal with quite serious mental illnesses like that. And so now that's what I'm trying to do, is just talk about it and go, yep, young people, even 10.
Sure, it just didn't even come up because of your age. People are like, oh, maybe it's just the flu or something.
Yeah. Yes. It was. It's got to be physical. So whether it's low blood pressure or something to do with hormones, or because panic attacks are a very physical thing for some people, and that's how it was for me.
Okay, so when you finally reached out for help, I understand that it happened in a sort of uncommon way. It was some of your classmates, I think,
Mm,
that first
mm,
helped you to realize that something might be drastically wrong.
mm. Yeah. So it was years after I first started having anxiety attacks and issues with anxiety. And by that point, when I got help, it had progressed and worsened and turned into a depression. And I'd had multiple depressive episodes by that point. And it really wasn't until it started to become so severe that I was self harming and suicidal ideation started to come up, that my friends really noticed that something was wrong and suggested that we go and talk to the school counsellor.
Yeah. When it comes to self-harm, can I ask what um, what that looked like? Please don't answer, because we want this to be a safe interview if you don't want to talk about it. Was it the standard kind of cutting, or were you doing something worse?
Um, I won't go into details, but yeah, it was
Fair
it
enough.
was harming myself, and it was a way to feel something because sometimes I felt nothing, or it was a way to distract from how sad I was feeling other days. So it was for multiple reasons as well. But yes, I would just harm myself.
It's something that, because it's affected my daughter, it's something that is really emotional for me. Uh, it's kind of funny because I've been suicidal for so many years, but it never really occurred to me to hurt myself consistently. Like, I did self harm a couple of times, but it was really out of kind of frustration. And I think about it a lot, like what's going through a person's head when they feel that they need to hurt themselves over and over again. And I know it's not rational. So let's start talking hope, though, because your story is not one of despair. Sure, terrible things happen in your head and in your mind and in your life, and you maybe did things because of your mental illness that you wouldn't. But you are, I don't know, what would you call yourself? An overcomer? I don't know. You struggle every day, but you still keep showing up. It's really impressive.
Yeah, I'm a battler.
A
I
battle.
think, like you said, I do. I mean, every day something comes up, something new to manage, something new to work through. But I am used to sitting in the uncomfortable moments now and continuing on regardless. Being comfortable with being uncomfortable has been the biggest achievement of my life.
Now I want to delve into the thing that you said while we were at a school doing a MIEACT presentation. But before we go into what you said that helped me so much, in reading the news article about you, you were one of those kids in a MIEACT session. You were one of the kids that you now speak to. Can you tell me about that? I mean, that's just amazing to me.
Yeah, so by the time I had a MIACT speaker in my school, I was in year 10. So I had been struggling for years, but I'd also been accessing help for a few years. So I
Yep.
was well into my journey of understanding my mental illness and trying to treat it. But for me, it provided me with hope that there were other people out there who managed their own mental health really proactively, who still identified as having a mental illness, but could live very full and meaningful lives even with that. And it gave me hope that because I was starting to suspect that this might be a lifelong thing for me, that I would be okay and that I could do that too.
Yeah. This is a really unexpected opportunity, because I've always wanted to ask one of those kids, did anything that we say today make sense? Did anything today help you? And clearly it does.
Yes, it does. I mean, just someone standing in front of you being so vulnerable and telling their story and the some of the darkest moments of their life, and then standing in front of you saying, "And it passed, and I'm here now, and
Yeah.
there is hope." Because people tell you when you're young and you're struggling, people tell you that there's hope, that things will end, that things will get better. But unless they show that vulnerability and they kind of prove it to you, you don't believe them.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, your story's incredible. So, what one thing I do love about you, and I've really enjoyed it when I've listened to your talks, and even in our conversation today, you know what you can talk about, what's safe for you to talk about, and you know what's not safe to talk about. Do you think about that much when you go to speak to a school, when you're drafting your story for MIACT? Are you keeping in mind that, okay, this is something that I can say safely, and this is clearly something that won't be safe for me to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes back to the training that we first do at MIEACT, which is part of that do no harm framework, which is how
Yep.
to safely share your story. And the first part of that is context and purpose. So there being a purpose to what you're saying and putting it in the right context. Because I'm very comfortable and very open with sharing a lot of dark things about what I've been through because I've had to do that over the years. You share it with doctors and psychiatrists and all kinds of strangers. So I'm used to opening up, but I understand that it's not going to be helpful for the other person on the other end of that all the time. And
Yep.
I don't want to negatively impact anyone. I want to help, and I think that there are ways that I can speak that is more helpful than other ways.
Yeah. Oh, that actually surprised me when I was doing the training. The idea that if I go too far in my story, not only am I jeopardizing my mental health, but if I make a kid say cry, they're now focused on their emotion and they're not listening to the story. So they're not getting out of it what we're trying to put out there, that it is a message of hope, even
Yeah,
though it can,
yeah,
if you come in halfway through, some of them don't really sound like stories of hope, but always
no,
by the end. So having been somebody that sat there and watched it, why did you decide to present to MIEACT and go, hey, I'd like to have a crack at this?
I think I finally, as soon as I saw it when I was in year 10, I knew that it was something I wanted to do one day, but I knew that I'd
Hmm.
also have to be ready
Yep.
because I wanted my story to be one of hope and, like we talk about, having a recovery emphasis. So I never expected that I would be able to stand there in front of a classroom and say, I'm fully recovered, I no longer have a mental illness, and everything's better now, because I just don't think that's a practical expectation. I think that I will forever be managing my mental health just like I do my physical health. And that's what I want to get across. That's what I want to normalize. That we all have a responsibility to ourselves, whether we're severely mentally ill or just managing the day to day stresses that come up in life. We all have to do that. And it's not scary and it's okay. Um, and I wanted to be able to stand up there and confidently share how I do that. And to do that, I needed to be in a place where I had been managing and quite stable for a few years. And so I feel like I've finally reached that point in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I loved is the more schools I go into, the more I realize how old I am. Even I was in with one of our other educators, Beth, the other day, and she said, even in Mark's day, I mean, your generation, it's like, oh man, back when things were black and white because we were so old. But one thing I did like, and I was really impressed by it, is your age. I mean, you are far distant, obviously 5-6 years out of high school, but you still at an age with these guys where your impact coming across is it's almost peer to peer, almost. It's not, because you're in front of the room, you're the educator, all that sort of stuff. But I was so impressed with how riveted, particularly the young women are when you talk.
I mean, I feel like I'm talking to myself just a few years ago. And
Mm.
I feel like that's where I make the biggest impact, and because I can empathize with where they're sitting. Like I can even sit, and I'm a little bit further away from them, but not that far. I sit
Yeah.
in front of the year sevens and I look at them and I just see myself, and it becomes really easy to talk to that and to talk to them when I put myself back in their position, which was not that long ago.
Yeah. I want to just ask a little bit about the transition to finding help, particularly because you were so young. There'll be people listening to this thinking, well, Mark's story's fine, but he's like 50. sometimes he mentions his kids, and I don't go into great detail about them because I don't want to embarrass them. But you were clearly quite young when you started
Mm.
experiencing mental health issues. How difficult was it for you to get help once you started
Mm.
to move into that world? Like we spoke earlier about, some friends of yours said, hang on, you need to be concerned. How was your parents' reaction to that? I mean, that must have been devastating for them. But from your point of view as a kid, what did you see happen around that time?
I was really lucky in my experience. So even though it took a few years for me to speak up, and that's what I'm trying to call out now, is the fact that I didn't say anything because I didn't understand what was going on, and because I did experience a lot of self stigma about mental illness, and I can't have that, and
Mm.
nothing's gone terribly wrong in my life for me to, it didn't make sense in my head. Um, Once I did speak up though, and once I did reach out to the school counsellor, I was so lucky because they were incredible and they fought for me. And they pushed for me to see other counsellors, such as the Headspace service that we have. I started to get more in touch with my doctor, who was very proactive in diagnosing me and prescribing medication. And I was connected to the right services that I should have been connected to.
Right.
And my parents were fully supportive of that. They were terrified. Um, it was, they had no idea what was going on, and they did not understand why their 13, 14-year-old wanted to die. But
Yeah.
they were they were there. They were fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself. And I remember Dad would pick me up off the floor and drag me to appointments to see my psychologist. And um, we were all in survival mode, but I couldn't have done it without them. And I think in some ways I was unlucky that I was so young, but in other ways I was lucky because I could never have navigated the system if I had been left to do it on my own. I just wouldn't have done it.
Yeah. And speaking of that, it's no secret that the mental illness system is, I don't know, I want to call it broken, but yeah, it's just terrible. Underfunded, um, lack of access. Yeah, no, it's not a good thing. But what excites me through your story is that even though you were caught young, you were still able to access the services because we, my daughter, we found out she had mental health issues uh, on the day that she tried to take her own life. So we went into her bedroom, or my wife did, and found her unconscious, vomited, soiled the bed. And when the paramedics came, they said, "What's going on?" And we said, "Oh, it's just epilepsy. She has epilepsy." And the guy said, "No, no, I don't think so. This is a suicide attempt." And when you're a parent watching that, I can just imagine what your parents were going through. It's yeah, and for me as a dad, I just felt this incredible guilt that I didn't know that she was going through all this stuff. Um, and I had to make a conscious effort to put that stuff aside, put the guilt aside, because it wasn't helping her and it was just
Yeah.
damaging me. So let's talk about now. You are a very, very positive person. You come across very positive. Every time I've seen you, you've got a smile that lights up a room. But you mentioned off camera that your struggle is still a daily one.
Yeah. Yeah. um, when I saw you last week on Wednesday, and we rocked up in the car park, and I said, "Oh, I've just listened to your podcast, where you've mentioned a bit about my story, and thank you for being so honest and sharing your experience about having a shit day because we still all have those. That was a shit day for me. And I left pretty quickly after that. And you know that because I went home because I wasn't feeling well. And it was exactly for those reasons. My anxiety was so high that morning and I really wasn't feeling well. And for me, that comes across, it's I feel very, very nauseous and physically I just feel like I'm going to be sick. So I had to go home and lie down and be horizontal for the remainder of the day. And I had only gotten there because I just put one foot in front of the other. I do still wake up on days like that. They happen sometimes every few months or so. Sometimes, if it's a bit more of a stressful time, it'll happen once a week. And I just need to take baby steps and one thing at a time. Um,
Yeah.
and for me, that meant that I made it to the school, but it meant that I couldn't quite make it to the presentation. But I had made it to the school, and that was more than I thought that I was going to manage.
This is going to sound like a stupid question, maybe. I don't know. Is there anything I could have done in that moment? Because there's a lot of carers out there that are thinking that if they said the right thing at the right time, maybe it would have fixed everything. I already know what the answer is going to be.
Yeah, we all know it there, and it's so frustrating. And I see this when I care for my own loved ones, not even when they have serious things going on, but when they're distressed in their own lives. And the most frustrating thing is feeling helpless. And when I went home that day, I went and saw my partner, and that can be really frustrating. Where he just wants to take away all of that distress and all of that pain that I'm feeling, and he wants to make it better. Um, but we just have to, and I know I just have to sit there and wait it out, and all I need is for someone to sit there with me and maybe stroke my back, to hold my hand, to get me a glass of water. All of these little things make a huge difference and they make it easier and they don't take away any of the pain. And there's nothing that they can say, but
Yeah.
sit there with me and be patient with me. Yeah.
Okay, so you said something in your session that really revolutionized my thinking, and it was weird because I'm looking at you and you're easily like 30 years younger than me, and it wasn't intentional, but I was thinking there's not really much I'm going to be able to learn from this little kid today. But you mentioned something which has been pivotal in my mindset and changing a mindset and revolutionizing the way that I think about my mental illness. And it had to do with patience. I'm very much hoping that you'll share your thoughts on that important subject because you say it much better than I ever could.
Um, it was definitely the big concept that has ultimately, I think, saved my life or extended it. Um, when I was younger and I was very suicidal, I was impulsive and often desperate, and I just needed everything to be better immediately. Um, and it was only once I started to realize that time would just pass and I could slow down a bit, and let days pass and
Mm,
be more patient, that it took the immediacy out of it. Um,
yeah.
and it meant I didn't need to act on that. And then I've kind of expanded that to be to my anxiety, to when I have panic attacks and to when I have low days now. I trust that all I do is wait it out and wait for time to pass and things change. So for me, patience just means that time will pass and things will change. And I trust that process now because I've experienced it for 10 years.
Now, a question that somebody actually posed online to me about this is they said that so if somebody just tells you to suck it up and it'll get better eventually, I think they're kind of missing the point because
Mm,
even though, say, that day that you said that you went home and you lay down because you were nauseous and think because of your anxiety and stuff, you were
mm,
still putting in place your mental health plan, weren't you? It's
Mm.
not like you
Yes.
retreated to your room and were banging your head against the wall saying, when will this ever end? It was like you were doing exactly what you needed to do for your mental health in that moment.
Yeah. Yes. It's not about sucking it up or ignoring it or trying to make it go away. It's not about fighting it. I think it's about kind of this ultimate acceptance that I have of what's happening to me in that moment. And it's a very
Yeah.
mindful thing where I'm experiencing it in very small moments. And that makes it a lot easier to handle and a lot less overwhelming than when I think about big picture what's going on. I just take each minute at a time, or
Yeah.
live second to second. Because when things are really in my head that are so distressing, it's too overwhelming to try and think about it hour by hour. Sometimes you go back to minute or second by second.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it changed things for me because I realized so I maintain really well. I'm on my medication. I do the things that I need to do, but there's still those low times. And the low
Mm.
times, I would start to get really angry, really frustrated, like, oh, I've gone back to the beginning. And putting into place what you've said, saying to myself, being mindful, saying, hang on, mate, it's okay. Just keep your head down, keep yourself safe, keep yourself in a place where you can't be triggered or pushed or, where things won't happen that will exacerbate. And that's been so comforting for me to realize that, hey, I might not be doing exactly what I planned for the day, but I'm still managing what I need to do to be healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going back to basics. It's keeping it really simple, slowing everything down. Um, and because I've got enough noise going on in my head, really just trying to, yeah, I can deal with all the other thoughts later. I just need to get through this moment.
Yeah. Do you think when you were real young that you wished that somebody had seen your quote unquote mental illness, as if somebody had diagnosed it correctly? Do you think that would have helped when you were super duper young?
Yeah. If I had been given a diagnosis of anxiety or panic disorder or a number of the diagnoses I could have received
Yeah.
at 10, if I could have been diagnosed with depression at 11, any of these things would have saved me so much pain later down the track,
Yeah.
helped me to better understand what was going on, helped me to feel less ashamed of what was going on, and to realize that it was not all my fault,
Yeah.
and that things could get better because I thought that life was just this way. I thought that it was normal to be so sad, or so worried all the time. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't have got to the point of thinking that life was too hard and impossible and I shouldn't be a part of it, if someone
Yeah.
had told me that actually it's unusual for life to be this way and for things to feel like this. There are treatments available. There are other people who are experiencing what you're experiencing. And it's okay. If I had received any of those messages, it would have made a massive difference.
So, what would you say to a parent that's listening that is concerned about their child?
Mm.
What would your advice be from your perspective? And you're not a parent yet and all
Mm.
that sort of thing. But as a person that's been through it, a person in their mid 20s, what would your advice be for a parent that's concerned that their young children might be suffering?
Mm. Listen, talk, ask questions, create a space where they feel like they won't be dismissed if they say something that's concerning them. Um, Tell them that it's okay to not be okay all of the time and that you're not. I was always scared that I would scare my parents. And by bottling it all up, I probably scared them a whole lot more later down the track. Um,
Yeah.
so, creating that environment of acceptance and warmth and um, nothing's off the table. I hear of a lot of parents these days who have created those environments or are trying to, and it brings them closer to their child as well because the child trusts them and is open. I think there are, should your child disclose something, there are absolutely places and people that you can talk to about that and take it further and take them seriously. If they say something's not right, something's not right.
Yeah. So I have to ask, because talking about this stuff just makes me really sad. What does your life look like now? And there's that
Um,
smile. I love that smile.
yeah. Look, I'm optimistic. I'm very optimistic because I feel like I have um, strength, and I've found the strength within all the things that I've gone through. I feel like my life is better than it otherwise would have been because I understand myself so much more now. Um,
Yeah.
I feel like I have an advantage because I I understand all these concepts like patience, and I can apply that to driving, and suddenly I'm you know I'm finding that much easier than everyone else who just doesn't think about these things. I live a really considered and deliberate life, and I I find so much enjoyment in the smaller things that other people maybe don't notice. Because for
Yeah.
years I didn't have any of that. I find
Mhm.
so much meaning and power in little things like sunshine and connection with other people. And I appreciate it so much because I didn't
Yeah.
have it for 10 years. So
Yeah.
I am just living a very appreciative, thankful life and focusing on those simple things that I think matter to me.
And I think from what I've heard you talk about, a very, very full life. You've got people
Yeah,
around you, you've got love in your life, you're at uni or you're building a career. Um,
yeah, yeah,
you're doing really,
yeah.
really well.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not about any of those surface things either. And I don't want people to think that that's what you need to be successful. I think my biggest success, like I said, is being comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's understanding my mental health and understanding my brain and understanding myself. And those are all lovely surface things. Probably more so like, when you look at career or uni or those things that we use to measure success in our modern world. I actually think it's more about the relationships that I have with people and the relationships that I have with myself. That's the most important one.
You are the wisest 20 old person I've ever met. I'm just delighted that I bumped into you through MIEACT. I'm looking forward to getting to know you better. I'm looking forward to working with you at MIEACT. I look forward to hearing your stories again. And I just want to say, you mentioned earlier about you came to a session and you needed to leave early. We were so proud of you that you did that, and we spoke about it that afternoon. And Beth was like, "I'm going to reach out," and but nobody went, "Oh, she made it so much harder for her." Everybody just went, "Man, she had the courage to stand up and say she was having an issue." We were really, really proud of you for doing that, mate. That was
Yeah,
an awesome example for all of us.
thank you. And thank you for that support. I mean, if there's a place where I'm going to find it, I hope that it would be at MIACT, but I definitely did. Yeah, so thank you because I feel like that's the way we're moving in our society, and it really does excite me where we are accepting of people when they are honest and vulnerable, and we see that as strength. And I'm really
Yeah.
excited by that.
All right, mate. I always finish off an interview by giving you the final thoughts. I'm going to throw you under a bus. It can be a subject about anything to do with the mental health that we've talked today. What would be your message to people today if you had the opportunity to sit down one on one with somebody that, I don't know, maybe struggling, knows somebody that struggles? What would you say to them today?
Gosh, I think that it's not all terrible. There's actually some real glittery, shiny bits in mental illness and in mental health. And there's power and hope in that. And I think everyone finds it in their own unique way. But I think keep having that, keep being patient, trusting that things will change. It's like how I finish my MIEACT story is I say there's only three things that are inevitable in the world, which is death, tax, and change. And just trust in that change will always happen. It's a guaranteed. So wait it out and just see what happens, but be excited.
You are awesome, mate. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to put the links to your interview underneath all the podcast and that. But this has surpassed my expectations, mate. You're amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.